Pretty important part of the web design slash user experience process, planning process, is the wireframe stage, where we look at putting together or focusing on structuring content on a page and working out how that content will interact with other content areas and how the user or the audience will flow through that content. I'm going to spend a few moments working through a wireframing process in Adobe XD, and I'm going to base that wireframe on these very loose sketches that I've put together here for my small business, which is a skateboarding brand. You can see in my loose sketches here I've got 5 or so content areas that I've planned for. I've got a main page where users are welcomed to the content and to the brand. I've got a shop page where I'm selling products. We've got a team page, a bio page, and also a contact page, and I'm going to try and work through putting together as many of those pages as I can in XD, time permitting. Let's jump over to XD and start a new document and look at putting together that wireframe so we can see how this content actually works in a kind of a real world environment. I'm only going to do this in a mobile view, and I'm going to use an iPhone template or an iPhone kind of preset document size. So I'll click on that and open that up in XD. Alright, so here we've got our first page, and we can start putting together, start structuring some content. I think I'm just going to close, I think I'll close that panel and look at the grid first of all. Before I get to the grid, we can navigate around this workspace in the same way as we can all Adobe products. Spacebar to kind of pan left and right across your work, and Command plus and minus to go in and out to look at your work in detail. So we want to set up a grid, and I'm going to set up a layout grid. We can either have a kind of a traditional grid or a layout grid with columns, and I'm going to set up a 4-column grid for my work. I think that's pretty appropriate in this for this mobile view port that we're going to be wireframing for. So you can see here that I've got 4 columns, a gutter width of 10, column width of 68, and we've got margins of 36. That'll work perfectly for my purposes. All right, let's start putting some graphics on the page. And the idea with a wireframe is yes, to be pixel perfect, but not really worrying about design details or any of the kind of bells and whistles. We're really looking at that underlying framework for content, that structure for content. Once we've got that in place, and once that's successful, it's really easy to turn that wireframe into more of a high fidelity mock-up or a high fidelity design. Okay, so we're going to work on the welcome page first, and if I just tab back to Photoshop, we can see that my main page here, my home page, consists of a logo at the top, and this is really rough, some sort of feature or hero bit of media, a heading, text, and a kind of a call to action button. So let's pop all those elements in place. To start with, I'm going to add kind of like a header panel. So I'm grabbing the rectangle tool, and I'm going to come over here and just drag a rectangle out for my the header of my page. So once I've done that, you can see that it's in place. Kind of looks familiar to assets in other apps, and we've got over on the right hand side, we've got our properties that we can adjust. Let's start with the fill. I don't want any border, and I'm going to make this a kind of a dark panel at the top. So I'm not going to work in color, I'm going to work in black and white. I don't want a color palette to kind of distract from that core functionality of the wireframe, which is to structure the page and structure our content. So I'm going to fill that, and I'm also going to set a height that's, I don't know, a bit more of a rounded figure. Set a height of 80. I can turn on and off the grid. If I just go back to, if I click on my title, and I might change that to home page. So if I click on my title here, I'll get the document. I'll get the document properties, and then if I click on individual elements, I'll get those properties for that element. Okay, so I've got a header in place, and I just use the shortcut to take my guides away, which is Command comma. And turning them back on. Let's make a little navigation menu element up the top here. I'm just going to use the line tool and change the border. Give it a rounded cap, and maybe make that 5 points. And I'm going to duplicate that 3 times, holding the Option key down and the Shift key, and then clicking and dragging. You can see that XD gives me pretty good kind of guides in terms of spacing elements. So I've done that a second time there, and you can see that it tells me when I've got that perfectly positioned. And I'm going to select, I'm going to select all 3 of those elements, and I'm going to group them, Command G, and I'm also going to right click on that item and make that a component. So a component is something that I can reuse multiple times, and if I have a look over here, you can see all the components that I'm using, and this is my first component, and I'm going to change it to maybe my menu icon. So that's good. I also want to include space for a logo up the top here. And I'm going to do that. Oops, I'm going to do that with text. I'll try that again. Now in terms of typography, logo-y, in terms of typography, I'm not going to worry too much about final typography, but I am going to think about typographic hierarchy. So I'm going to think about kind of the weight of headings, size of headings in relation to body copy and readability as well. I'm going to bring the size of that up. Maybe 28, and I'm going to make that bold. And I'm just working in Helvetica at the moment. We'll change that to white, changing the fill color to white. All right, now let's add a panel for a feature element. So clicking and dragging out a rectangle, taking away the border. I might make it as dark as the header up there. And this is going to be a spot for a video. So I'm going to include a video play button, and I'm going to quickly generate that inside of XD by giving that ellipse a border, adding a triangle to that. So we can rotate things in the way that we'd expect to rotate them. And we can manipulate items in the same way that we would in Illustrator or Photoshop. So I'm just nudging that element around. Also, the Shift and Option keys do the same thing as they do in Photoshop and Illustrator. So if I hold Option and Shift down, I can change the size of something based on its center. If I hold Option down, I can manipulate an object, kind of mirror that deformation. All right, so there's my play button, kind of in place. I can see when it's in the center of that item there. Let's move on, and let's just check the depth of that and make it something, a little bit more round number, of a round number. And I'm going to duplicate that element down the bottom here, and this is going to be where my welcome message is. I'll make that a little bit lighter. Let's add some copy for my welcome message. I'm going to center that text, make it a little bit bigger, because this is going to be my kind of H1 on the page, I suppose. And then I'm going to quickly head over to a blind text generator and grab a sentence to add as a kind of welcome message. A bit bigger than that, maybe 18. And I don't want that bold, I just want that regular, wherever that is. And I'd like it a dark grey, not black, but a dark grey. Maybe even a little bit bigger than that. It's looking good. Final thing to finish off that front page is to add a call to action button. And we'll do that just with a rectangle. And you can see we've got those corner handles. I can make a pill shape. I'm going to remove the border. Oops, and I'll add some text into that button over the top there. It'll be read more, that'll do. Just center that. And I'll group that, and I could turn that into a component if I wanted to. All right, so there's our first page, and I might just break there, come back and make a couple of the down pages.